Mace Windu is one of the most iconic characters in the Star Wars universe. That's why it doesn't surprise me that the Mace Windu deck profile that I came out with a couple weeks ago is not only almost at 5,000 views at one of my most viewed videos for Star Wars Unlimited, but also it's been sitting at one of the top hottest decks in SWDB for a few weeks now. People love Mace Windu and people are dying to use him in the trading card game, and I want to help you do that. After I released my previous video on Mace Windu, I was honestly struggling a little bit with the deck. I felt like it had a lot of weaknesses, and it didn't have a lot of options in red to be able to fill those weaknesses, so I felt like you just kind of had some hard-countered matchups. But since then, I've made some changes to the deck that I kind of feel give the deck a clear direction on what it's trying to do in the late game. And the more I'm playing it, the more I'm asking myself, is this deck tier 1? Can this deck actually stand up to the top meta decks? I'm starting to think yes. Greetings Internet, DDA here, and double aspect decks are becoming my bread and butter in this game. I've built a ton of double aspect decks of every color. Red is no exception. This deck list has been tried and true, is honestly winning me a lot of games as I grow more accustomed to playing it and knowing when to hold cards and when to resource them. I think that's the hardest skill with this deck because you have to have some foresight about what's to come with the Mace Windu deck. An example of that would be if the opponent, whether or not the opponent is going to attack your units, because a card like Grenade Strike becomes a lot better if the opponent is running into your units on the ground arena, is going to live with 1 or 2 HP left. So it's just really hard, those resourcing decisions, like when you have a deck with a high volume of events and removal versus units, like knowing when to resource the removal, knowing when to resource the units, and knowing which direction to take the deck in, the bare minimum number of units that you need to hold into your hand to be able to kind of curve out and still enact your strategy without falling behind and, say, passing if the opponent doesn't play into what your plan is. There's a lot of nuances to this deck. I'm going to be releasing a lot more match videos, a lot more Mace Windu match videos to help you all try to use this deck a little better. It's not straightforward. Mace Windu gives you a lot of options, but that's one of the fun things about the deck, because even in a double red aspect deck that I would otherwise call extremely linear, it does have some different avenues that you can go down, because Mace Windu is kind of augmenting the cards that you play in your deck. So for some kind of simple changes that I wanted to go over, I did end up dropping down to 2 of the Y-Wings. I still feel Y-Wing is a great card in the deck, although in certain matchups, like if you're base racing Sabine, or if it's like hyper late game and the action economy really matters, Y-Wing becomes less powerful. So it's a great turn 1 play, but it's not that, and even mid game it's still good, but late game it's not great. So I wanted to drop it down to 2. I actually added it in a tech. I moved the tech from the sideboard to the main board. I did that in order to make the late game better, and then also make the flamethrower upgrade a little better as well. And because I added the tech into the main board, I went up to 2 flamethrowers. I think in my original version, I released it with 1 flamethrower main and 2 pillage main. I went down to 1 pillage and went up on the flamethrowers, because I feel like flamethrower is just so powerful with Mace Windu. Like putting it on Cassian or Tech in the ground arena, you just run the ground arena with those units, being able to do 6 damage with Tech or 7 damage with Cassian is just extremely powerful. With Mace Windu, and you can add extra damage, spread the damage. Basically, you own the ground arena when you put Flamethrower on one of those units, and it's so powerful that I felt we needed 2 copies. And what we did to fill out the late game of this deck is adding Crate Dragon main. I had a few people message me, actually, about this Mace Windu deck and how it was struggling with blue decks. Absolutely agree. The late game was not great in the original version. The Mace Windu unit has been falling down for me in power. I find myself holding it a lot, and there are many situations where Mace Windu is not gonna perform the way that you want him to. You pretty much are only getting full value out of him if he's readying with the ambush. The ambush is good. The 5 damage is really what is limiting him, because he can't take out endgame units. He can only really take out early or mid-game units, and so it makes him very limited on what he can do. So I dropped down to 1 in the main deck. So like that 1 is in the main deck for you to be able to hold it, to be able to use in the right situation. But there are a lot of times where, say, doing like an open fire K2 is going to be better than doing a Mace Windu, and things like that. Like, you have plenty of other options that you can do. But I want that 1 copy in there because it is still good when it lines up. It's amazing, and you will win games. It's just I'm finding that it's not lining up that much, so I dropped it down to 1. Additionally, I dropped down to 1 of the Senatorial Corvettes. And so for both of these reasons, the dropping of those units down is just based on play. One of the things I do is I play my decks a lot, and I find the cards that I'm not playing, I'm resourcing a lot, and I know then that I should probably either reduce those or reevaluate them. The Senatorial Corvette card plays a very specific role in the deck, and the role that it plays is it's amazing in the blue matchup because you'll throw it down, and it kind of demands an answer, and a Sentinel cannot be an answer. It demands a removal answer. It basically demands a fell or a takedown from the opponent. And so it kind of forces them to fell or takedown it, because 5 damage Saboteur is usually too much for the blue decks to handle with if you drop it mid-game. So it demands a fell or a takedown, but then it double punishes them because they have to spend their resources, they have to fell or takedown, and then they also have to discard a card from their hand. So in the blue matchup, it's like S, but in the other matchups, it's not great. We do need help in the blue matchup, so that's why I think it still deserves a spot. But the thing that's going to help way more in the blue matchup than a Senatorial Corvette will is, of course, Crate Dragon. And again, I had people message me struggling with the blue matchup. Crate Dragon's main are going to be there to solve the blue matchup completely. I feel the Mace Windu deck is so good at answering threats on the board. And one of the things that Crate Dragon takes advantage of is if the opponent has an open board, you will just win the game, because then even if they answer the crate with a removal spell, they are going to take damage, and then you're going to have another setup turn, and they're still going to have an open board. It really, and if they don't have the immediate answer, like the fell or the rival's fall or something like that, you will just win the game. If they have an open board and you drop crate, 9 times out of 10 you win that game. And Mace Windu really kind of perpetuates that. The other thing I wanted to mention is the sideboard, because I don't think I talked about the sideboard too much in the original video. So I wanted to mention the sideboard. This deck can play the discard strategy. I talked about that. The sideboard is dedicated a lot to the discard strategy. We have 5 cards in the sideboard that's dedicated to the discard strategy. And I think most of the cards, yeah, I'm just looking at my list, 8 of the cards are actually dedicated to the control matchup. So you can see, like, we mostly are pre-boarded against, like, mid-range and aggro, which makes sense because we're deployed on 7 leader. We have to prepare to slow down the game to get our leader out. And then that's why we dedicate most of the sideboard to the control matchup to make our deck slower. The deck is already slow because you're Mace Windu, but, to kind of meet the control decks in their speed, with their speed. That's what the sideboard is for. So we have 5 cards dedicated to the discard package. That is, we have the 2 Pillages, we have the 1 Steela, and then the 2 Senatorial Corvettes to fill out the 3/3, and then the 1 Steela to tutor Pillages and Grenade Strikes and Daring Raids and things like that. We do also have Fell the Dragon in the sideboard against the grindy hyper control decks that are gonna, drop Avengers, drop Snokes, and all those things. It's really hard for us to answer, like, say, an Avenger. You have to, like, double open fire it, or it's always a 2-card swing for you if they play Avenger. So, units like that, like Avenger specifically, are really difficult for this deck, Mace Windu, to answer. So that's why the Fell is in there. You pay 6 for it in certain matchups that you're going to be facing, like Avengers, Devastators, and things like that. Other Crate Dragons. So this list, I think it's so solid. I think Mace Windu is really close to tier 1. I think he actually might be tier 1. And to continue on this discussion about whether Mace is tier 1 or not, me adding Fell the Dragon into the sideboard in the mono red deck, kind of shows that there's another Mace Windu deck out there that has some serious potential to be tier 1 as well. And that is Mace Windu Blue. Now, why Mace Windu Blue, right? So, like, double red is obvious. You get the Rancors, you get the aggressions, and then you get the unlimited power. All three of those cards are just S tier in Mace Windu. So running double red does make sense. The weakness of double red is, like I said, blue decks, but more specifically, it's units with 5 or more HP. Units with 5 or more HP always take 2 actions for red, aggression, mace to answer. It's just how the deck functions. It's a limitation of the deck that you kind of got to know going in. So if you would play Mace Windu in blue, you get the removal spells, you get the takedowns, and you get the Fell the Dragons that can answer bigger units in one action that the red deck cannot do. So just kind of jumping over to the blue deck list, I just kind of threw this together based on my experience. I looked at some other blue lists online. So some of the advantages that you do get to use Force Throw, which is a big thing. I really didn't like that I wasn't running Force Throw in Mace Windu. Force Throw is the perfect card for Mace Windu. It pushes both strategies that Mace wants to do, which is slow down the game by discarding cards and then also damaging units. It's like his perfect card. Problem is, red doesn't have that many Force users, red hero. So you're kind of stuck when you're in mono red. You don't really have the Force users to support it. So in the blue deck, you do get access to Force Throw. I am only running it at 2 right now because I'm not running any of the one drop force users like Barris. I've been seeing some Mace Windu lists online that are going like full on Barris. Like they go 3 Barris, 3 Mystic Reflection, 3 Force Throws, 3 Jedi Lightsabers, and I'm just not ready to commit to that with this deck. As you can see, I'm not running any Barris. I'm only running Force Throw at 2. I played a lot with Barris in my other decks. I have increased my opinion on her, but she just kind of gets hard countered in certain matchups with certain cards like Make an Opening, Cad Bane, Quinlan. There are a lot of things that can just take out Barris, and I wouldn't want to dedicate like 6 to 9 cards to that early Force strategy. To just have it crumble in certain matchups like Django and things like that. Like, you can set yourself up to be in a really bad spot. But the Bo-Katans are replaced by Restored Arc, putting more of a focus on space in this deck. The blue version of the deck is definitely better in the space arena because you got the A-Wings and the Restored Arcs and the Y-Wings and the Red 3s. You have Obi-Wan's ship coming in, doing tons of damage as well in the mid-game and pinging units. You have the Force users like Yoda and Kanan to help you out do Force throws and things. You have Perilous Position to answer leaders. That's one of the things that Mace Windu Double Red struggles with a little bit because it can't answer really any leader in the game in a single action outside of, say, doing a Cassian Flamethrower for 7. That's probably the only way you could do it. Or maybe like a K2 Red 3 Fleet Lieutenant. But that's like super one-off situation. But the Perilous Position gives you a lot of options. Like, for example, you could Perilous any leader in the game pretty much, and then Open Fire Mace just answers it next turn, and things like that. Like, you have a lot of options. Of course, you see we're running the takedowns and the fells. Those are taking the place of aggressions. Aggression, great card in Mace Windu, 6 damage, can draw a card, gives you a lot of options, gives you a lot of control against equipment. But having the hard removal does help Mace, and it does help you push to that Crate Dragon, as well as replacing the Rancors with the Luke Skywalker. Again, great late game unit, help you push. Really, Luke Skywalker is much, much better than Mace Windu. Luke Skywalker is going to give you that little bit of healing, the removal, and then just help you push into the late game to really, really get down those Crate Dragons. So the Mace Windu Blue deck, actually, it plays a little similar to Rey. I think it is more, so it's less unit-centric, the Mace deck, more control-y. And then it pushes you into the late game better. The Mace Windu leader is just far superior to Rey as a leader. Like, Rey will give you more value if she sticks, but she won't. Like, she only has 6 HP, so she's not going to stay around for very long. And that's really where Mace is the stronger leader, because he'll clear the board on deploy, and then he will just stand as a huge stat stick for you. So is the blue deck better? Is the red deck better for Mace? I'm not really sure. I've been playing the blue deck a little bit. It is slower than the red. I think the red can push a little bit more damage than the blue deck can. Just because your units have a little bit more power, and you have the Cassians in there, like we had to replace Cassian with Yoda and things like that. Like you have the stronger powered units. Rancor is just a monster, and then it's actually kind of weird. To be honest with you, I think I want to call the blue deck more control-y, but it's really not more control-y because you lose aggression and unlimited power. So it's more control-y against taller strategies, and it's less control-y against wider strategies. So the double red deck for sure is better against wider decks, and the blue deck is better against taller decks. So which one is better definitely depends on the meta. I think they have similar strategies. They even play similar cards, like the red deck is sideboarding Fell the Dragon. So back to the original question, is Mace Windu tier 1? Well, I think he may be. I think he is. If Quinlan is tier 1 in his low to the ground control-y way that he does things, I think Mace Windu is tier 1 in the late game control-y way that he does things. It's easier to kind of gravitate towards the earlier deploying leaders and see them for their power because it's just more apparent. It's more in your face. Like, turn 4, you're getting that leader. Mace Windu, and I saw some people commenting about how they're dying before the mace flip. If you are, your base is being destroyed before the mace flip, then I can tell you that there are one of two things going on. Either you need to hold removal for key units, and you need to not just remove, like sometimes I'll let units stick around, right? So like you can let like a 2 damage or a 3 damage unit stick around for just a little bit to kind of have your other removal take it, like maybe you hit it with a grenade strike for 1, and then mace flip gets it, or maybe you just kind of let that unit stick around, and then just hit it with an unlimited power. You really want to stall with Mace Windu, so your goal with Mace Windu in the early stages of the game should be to stall mostly, unless you're facing another stall deck, unless you're facing a control deck. In that case, then you want to take the role of the aggressor. So knowing when to play a stall game versus a aggressive game, that's going to be a big point as to how you can help yourself survive. But if you're facing an aggro deck and you're struggling to survive with the Mace Windu, trade units. Oftentimes against like Sabine, what I'll do is I'll meet them in the ground arena in the early game. If I know they're going ground, I'll meet them, like I'll throw down my Bo-Katan, I'll throw down my Sabine, I'll throw down my Cassian. But then after that first round, that first wave of units gets destroyed, I will go off of the ground then. Because I know the Poe Wrecker ECL is coming. So then I'll kind of just forget the ground because I know the Poe Wrecker ECL is coming. And then I'll switch space for the mid game. And then use my open fires and aggressions to clear their ground. Preparing for the unlimited power or rank or mace flip. And that unlimited power rank or mace flip should clear the board for you. As long as you're drawing 1 open fire or 1 aggression in the early game, you should be able to remove enough of their units. Also, Grenade Strike. I think Grenade Strike goes a long way to help in the early game. But yeah, so Mace Windu, one of the best new decks to come out in Set 3. Has 2 meta decks, in my opinion. I think he's difficult to play, and as people kind of learn how to play him and get used to his deck builds, we'll be seeing more of him. So if you want to see a lot more Mace Windu content, you want to see some Mace Windu matches that we have prepared for you on the docket, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned. And as always, turn your dial to Random Number Gaming for the best gaming guides and match videos.